Welcome to our Registrar Corp webinar today. We'll be learning about how adverse events are under the spotlight, what MoCRA compliance means to you. I'm pleased to introduce our resident cosmetic expert, Jacqueline Belomo, Senior Director of Cosmetic Science and Regulatory Affairs, who will share key MoCRA provisions that you must follow and how they impact your business operations. A seasoned, respected key figure in the cosmetics industry, Jacqueline will guide you through challenges with the new adverse event requirements and how to handle serious adverse events. Throughout this webinar, feel free to write any questions in the Q&A box with the question mark icon, not the chat section. And we've saved time at the end to answer them. We'll also follow up with a link to the recording so you can refer back to it at any time. Without further ado, Jacqueline, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Anne, and welcome everyone. I am so excited to be back on our webinar series and talking about, of course, adverse events. Today, we're just going to go through an overview of the new adverse event requirements for cosmetics. We're also going to talk about how it's impacting brands and manufacturers. And how it's impacting retailers and the overall consumer experience. Many of the conversations I've had in the last few months have been around adverse events and how brands and manufacturers have been handling the influx they have received of adverse events because the consumers are aware of what's going on. So let's jump right into it. But first, I want to remind everyone that Registrar Corp is the #1 in the business for cosmetics. We are the largest FDA compliance company. We have global experts in MoCRA compliance. We serve over 1,000 cosmetic companies. And I'm sure this is not a shock, but we have completed over 45,000 product listings in the past 3 months. So everyone should, come to us if you're having any trouble, if you have any questions. We are here to help. And most importantly for our discussion today, we are the only company that meets the ISO 27001 standard for data security to protect trade secrets. And as we go through adverse events and some software that we have available for everyone to see to help utilize your experience with adverse events, this becomes a huge important piece to making sure everything is secured. So why are adverse events happening now, right? Is it that we weren't paying attention in cosmetics? Was it that we didn't have systems in place? And those answers are no, right? Because the truth is cosmetics overall has just exploded. I always tell the story about, the only companies that thrived, during the Great Depression were cosmetic companies, right? Lauder launched during the Great Depression. During COVID, skincare and hair care just, exploded as well. So cosmetics never has what I want to say a downturn. If anything, we always have an upturn. And what we have been noticing is that the number of cosmetic products on the market has increased, and more people, more demographics are using cosmetics. So men are using cosmetics, teens are using cosmetics, even children are using cosmetics, right? So this is really increasing the overall experience that consumers are having with cosmetic products. And not necessarily that they're using products incorrectly, but maybe not using the products as they're intended, right? And that's something that we should really kind of understand when we're thinking about our products, the label reviews, and everything in between. We also are experiencing a huge influx of ingredients and chemicals being created. Frequently I hear new inkies come out, and I'm almost in shock saying, when did that come out, right? So we're seeing these new developments, and all raw material suppliers are trying to have the next new innovative technology. And that is creating a lot of new ingredients and chemicals that technically haven't been used in cosmetic products before. Not necessarily saying they're not safe, but we do not have a huge history of how they work with the human body, the human skin. Cosmetic companies are also, seeing the rate of product launches increase, right? Who can get there faster? So we are taking that, old school rules of long-term testing, and we are really kind of speeding that to market, right? And we're relying on 48-hour patch test or smaller RIPT studies. So we are really pushing the limits of what a true safety experience means and what a true safety dossier means. And then again, the consumer pressure for ethical and sustainable testing also means that we're doing things that are trying to prove the safety of our products without exploiting certain consumer ethical behavior, right? So no animal testing, using fake human skin, right? These testing methods, even though they are prove effective, we all know what stays true is the old-fashioned, human testing. But that can become very expensive, and especially for new brands launching or for brands that have, a lot of product launches, doing those repeated safety testings can quickly become unaffordable. MoCRA now requires those companies to specifically receive, record, and report serious adverse events to FDA, so that they can investigate and further decide if there needs to be an inspection or other actions needed to safeguard the consumers, right? So this transparency is new for cosmetics. We're new to this adverse event situation, and we sometimes feel that we have it under control, and we're going to go through all of that today. But it's very important to understand what this really means for a brand, what it means for a manufacturer. So we're going to jump right into it. What is an adverse event? And the FDA defines an adverse event as any health-related event associated with the use of a cosmetic product that is adverse, right? So something that causes an adverse, right, a negative effect on the skin. So this could be irritation, a rash, a burn, allergic reaction, and even hair loss. What is a serious adverse event? And this is going to be really important for anyone who maybe not had the 100% definition of what a serious adverse event was before learning about MoCRA. But FDA has already had in place a definition for serious adverse events, and this was directly related to products such as drugs and medical devices. So what you're going to see is very extreme, right? So death, life-threatening experience, inpatient hospitalization, congenital anomaly, birth defect. And with cosmetics now entering into these regulations, FDA has updated their definition for serious adverse event to include provisions that specifically occur with cosmetic products. So significant disfigurement, including serious and persistent rashes, second and third degree burns, significant hair loss, or persistent or significant alteration of appearance. And this is really important that I highlight here is what is significant hair loss? What is persistent or significant alteration of appearance, right? This is where, as a brand and a manufacturer, your investigation pieces and your process are going to help determine what that significant and persistent piece means to your product and to the individual that is making a claim that a serious adverse event had occurred using your product. I always use the example about hair. I have a ton of hair, so me losing a handful of hair is not significant. But for someone else, it could be. So understanding, how FDA has written this definition and how it applies during your investigation is really crucial for your safety and quality people to understand. And I just want to applaud all the safety and quality people on this phone call. I think we have the hardest job in industry, keeping everyone safe, keeping brand happy, keeping manufacturers happy, and making sure that quality products reach our consumers. It's no easy task, and I don't see it getting any easier in the future, but we're here to help at least alleviate some of that. Adverse events, again, are new to cosmetics. FDA has adopted the existing MedWatch form for drugs, medical devices and dietary supplements for cosmetics. We had a lot of Dr. Katz last year, at the end of last year, talking about adverse events, talking about how important it is for brands and manufacturers to manage adverse events. They really want to have insight into how cosmetic products are being used on market, how they're having any type of health related event happen to their consumers. So really take into account a full visibility of how FDA wants to look at adverse events. And this is, why it includes receiving adverse events properly, having your contact on the label, and we'll get into that. Record keeping, right? Are you keeping the right records? So even if you have not had a serious adverse event, have you had hundreds of adverse events that don't technically qualify? What does that look like for your product? And then adverse event reports require specific information, right, in regard to those health related events. Are you collecting all the information that you need? Are you asking the right questions? Are you, communicating properly and documenting every piece of communication that you have with a consumer who is reporting an adverse event? Most companies, I will say, do not have a proper adverse event system in place. And I say this because, we love to filter as much as possible through our customer experience people, our customer service people, right? So not really understanding that when it becomes a health related event, right, that needs to shift gears into a safety or quality person's review. And I say that because as someone who has experienced a lot of, questions around, I have a rash, I have an irritation, right? It cannot be done or evaluated by someone who is trying to appease a customer, right? There has to be a further investigation, a further conversation. And I say that because it's important that if you do not have something established right now, that you start thinking about how to establish something that can make it easier for your team to filter out those health related events versus unhappy customer events in a proper way that leads you to the right documentation that you need if inspected by FDA. So what does this mean for brands and manufacturers? Because they are going to take the huge hit of becoming responsible for all of these pieces. So again, receiving, having a review and investigation, record keeping, and then if needed, reporting to FDA. And one of the things, I really want to point out here is this review and investigation part, right? So that's not technically a requirement under MoCRA, but it is a requirement for you to fully understand as a brand what type of records you need to keep, and then understanding if you need to report to FDA. So receiving. Everyone knows, I hope, on this phone call that as of December 29th, 2024, that you need to include contact information on both the primary and secondary label of your cosmetic product. There was a huge flurry in the last 2 years of how to get this updated, how to properly do it, with maybe a little to not a lot of information from FDA of what would be acceptable and not acceptable to do on your primary and secondary packaging. Our labels are overwhelmed as is with all the information required, especially if you're working with global labels. There is so much information on there. How are you supposed to fit more, right? And this is what has led, a lot of people to question, how am I supposed to comply with this? How am I supposed to get the right information to my consumer about how to contact us? FDA has outlined that the appropriate way to have receiving adverse events on your label, you can have either a physical address, which would be a domestic street address, so your physical address of where your brand is, a domestic phone number, or an electronic contact. And this is huge because this is the first time FDA has allowed electronic contact to be available for adverse event receiving. You're not allowed to do this in drugs. You cannot do this in medical devices. So this is really key, and this comes from FDA's overall review and investigation into the consumer's ability to reach a URL, to reach a QR code. And I say that because they did an extensive study on food products. And they went from the most populated areas to the least populated areas, and they determined the consumer's ability to reach a URL, or that they have a phone available with them at all times to access the internet. So that is where this is coming from. I also feel it's a little bit of a test period, right? Does this work? Is this the best way? Big fan of technology. I think it helps us streamline so much of what we do on a daily life. And I think this will really help brands understand too, when dealing with an adverse event or a health related incident that happens with your product. The sooner you know, the better you know. I can't tell you the last time I mailed something in the mail, physical mail. I do make a lot of phone calls, but not my favorite. I have that, call anxiety. So I definitely feel there is a huge bonus that we got in the cosmetic world to be able to use this electronic contact information. Next up is the review and investigation. Again, not outlined in the regulation, but very important internally as a team, as a brand, as a manufacturer, that you have a process in place to properly review and investigate to determine if a adverse event is reportable to FDA, but also to collect all the necessary information you need in order to record keep the incident that occurred. First and foremost, we get a customer tells us they had a health related event, that they have a burn on their face and they don't know what to do, right? And I always say this when I talk about adverse events, is we're working with cosmetics, right? We are working with a very personal experience. These products go on our face, they go on our hair, they go on our body, they go on our eyelashes. You cannot get more personal than that, of someone putting these products on in the most personal space, in the most personal, front facing parts of their appearance, right? So anything that happens is going to be escalated 10 times. So understanding and having a proper process in place helps it initially alleviate all of those issues that you could potentially get from an unhappy customer or consumer experience. And I say that because you want to be ready, right? You want to have the response ready to go when you have someone contacting you. I have a burn on my face, or I have lost all my hair. You want to be able to respond in a way that makes them feel good, right? And that you have the ability to answer their questions immediately. Most companies do not have medical experts in house, so they may need to get outside, help. They might need to ask a doctor, ophthalmologist, or a toxicologist, or a dermatologist about what is going on. And that is where, a lot of those questions can come up that you need to ask during the investigation. Did they go to a doctor? Did they see medical help? Any of that comes into play helps your brand determine, or a manufacturer determine, if they need to have their own medical expert review the documentation that was also provided by their consumer. Another huge part to think about is the multi-geographic teams that could be involved, right? Do you have a US brand side team? Do you have an EU-based team? Do you have teams in France, in China? Dealing with all of those types of teams could get messy, right? So do you make your product in Europe, but you have a US team that doesn't know who to contact for quality or safety? Establishing those teams, who to get involved and who to be a part of the adverse event investigation, is crucial in those first few hours of receiving an adverse event, because you don't want to wait to say, who do I talk to? Who do I go to? Is our quality team available? It's important that you have that streamlined process and everyone is involved and everyone is notified at that time. Multiple departments also may need to do their own research and provide input to the regulatory team, to the quality team. You might need to contact your contract manufacturer to get batch records, to get CFAs. Was the pH, too acidic? Was the pH too basic? Was the viscosity off? Was the micro done correctly? All these teams or all these additional departments, or even suppliers or vendors that you need to work with, come into play when you have certain, adverse events that happen. You do not want to waste time wondering who is the right contact, who to go through, who to get retains from. Again, making it very important to have this process in place. All of this has to be done in a 15 business day deadline. And I think that is probably the scariest part of all of this. And I don't like using that word scary, but 15 days goes by so fast. And you don't want to have a delay in response to one, your consumer that is clearly upset about the health related event that occurred, but two, if you need to report to FDA, you want to be ready to go. You want to have your MedWatch form filled out. You want to have your statement ready to go. You want to have the ability to act quickly. And I have seen so many brands in the last 2 years really struggle because it's always, this will never happen to us. We haven't had an adverse event happen in 2 years. And once you put that out in the universe, I think that's when it happens. You get that adverse event, right? And you almost go into full blown panic. And that is not what we want for our industry, right? That's not what we want for our consumers. We don't want us to be the ones to not be prepared to deal with something that is health related that potentially could be a larger issue. Record keeping, again, we want to say we're the best record keepers, but sometimes when it comes to things that like adverse events that we've never had to keep records for before, it can get a little messy, and it definitely can lead to us asking some questions about where some of this information is stored, especially if there is an FDA request to see information about an adverse event, right? Currently, keeping adverse events records for brands is 6 years, 3 years for small businesses. Very important that when FDA requests findings of all your data, it could be a challenge to look back from 6 years ago. I know right now trying to find an email that I sent last week is difficult sometimes. So imagine trying to find an entire report, an entire investigation, email threads, phone call conversations that happened 6 years ago. And it's really important that the data that is provided is organized, right? There shouldn't be a confusion of when the conversation happened, what was said, what was done, what the brand did, or what the manufacturer did to resolve. The data itself is medical, personal, and in some cases legal. And so security is really important. This should not be on desktops. This should not be saved on unprotected servers. It should be protected because there is a risk, right, of this being exposed, medical data exposed, and it should be protected in that way. Again, FDA does have the authority to access these records relating to the cosmetic product, especially if they find it could be a risk to public health. It could be a risk to its consumers. And now, even more importantly, FDA can request a list of ingredients if it believes an ingredient caused a serious adverse event. And I think that is where we're really going to see more transparency into what is causing these adverse events. More I want to say, we've seen the influx of the fragrance allergens, right? And people believing it was cosmetic products that were causing it, but it was truthfully, allergens in these fragrances and these flavors that consumers were not aware were in it, nor were aware that they had any type of a reaction to these type of fragrances and flavors, right? And that is why we're moving into the disclosing fragrance allergens on labels. But more and more, I have seen, in industry, reactions to certain AHAs, PHAs. I've seen reactions to, hate to say it, but I've seen reactions to some shampoos and conditioners. We're adding these actives and these ingredients that have all these beneficial, essential benefits to it, but we're getting them in doses that we have never experienced before. So So we are on the age of brand new innovation and this type of product launch that is changing and rocking the beauty world. But in that same token, we have to understand that there could be a huge potential for adverse events to occur outside of what we expect for the norm. But I will also preface too, there is a lot of misuse of cosmetic products, and that is why it is so important to categorize your cosmetic product, put all the right warnings and labels and instructions of use with that as well. FDA reporting, this is new for cosmetics. There is a huge, disconnect to the form, as is to what cosmetic products have. So it can be difficult to fill out a MedWatch form if you have never filled out one before. If a serious event does occur, again, you have 15 business days to report to FDA. Any new material and medical information that is received on that same adverse event report up to 1 year needs to report it to FDA. It needs to be reported to FDA in that same 15-day deadline. And that's really crucial to understand, is that 15 business day deadline does not go away when you receive new information. So having a process in place to receive and to report back is really, really important. Again, FDA is recommending the MedWatch form be filled out, and it will eventually go the electronic way, but we are still in the paper form, and they are accepting emails through a specific email to report those adverse events. The MedWatch form, again, like I said, is currently used for drugs. So there's a lot of information on there that, is not needed for cosmetics, and it could be very confusing if you need to fill out for a cosmetic product. So is your brand ready to take on adverse events? And I did a little checklist for everyone because these are the things that I think internally that you should, evaluate. Do we have these things in place? Are we ready to take on an adverse event, several adverse events if they start coming in, right? Now that the label has our contact information on it, now that retailers are asking for that contact information, are we ready to take this on? So receiving. Do you have your contact information on both the primary and secondary packaging? Where reports are received should be checked daily. So no, if you do have a website, it needs to be where a consumer can go to report an adverse event. It should not be your saleable website. The electronic address is the quickest way to receive reports. A lot of us also don't want to put physical addresses of our brand on packaging. So the electronic address keeps it that you can check it every single day and then also be available to the consumer as an easy way to access. Also consider anything that is small packaging or limited spaces available. This has been a huge concern as we move into a paper Act talk as well with FDA, right? We're trying to reduce the amount of information and paper that we use, but how can we do that if we keep adding more information to our labels? And then also how to prepare to manage reports coming from a variety of sources, right? So we still know there's packaging out there and products out there that do not have contact information on them, right? How are you going to prepare if that comes through a Facebook? How are you going to prepare if that comes through an email, customer service, right? These are the things you need to think about, and then also prepare the multiple teams, a social team and your customer service team, that if you see something that is health related, it has to get escalated and moved to the safety team. Record keeping, I think this is going to be the hugest lift, right? And I say this because if there is not already some type of system in place or somewhere to keep this information, it could be kind of difficult to understand where and who needs to access this information. But records should include the consumer report, so the initial report that the consumer had a health-related event. It also should include all records of communication with a reporter or the consumer, and I say that because we have been hearing how retailers are now reporting directly to the brands on behalf of the consumer, right? So there's this third degree of conversation, records of the responsible person's assessment of the report. So when you receive that report, what was the initial assessment? Yes, this was not a serious adverse event. This was a small health-related event. It was isolated, and we took care of it and resolved the issue. Hospital, doctor, or relevant lab data. We have been seeing a lot more of consumers going to the doctor asking why they have a rash, why they have a burn, right? Going to the dermatologist is a lot more frequent than it has ever been. So understanding that when you receive an adverse event, chances are you are going to receive some type of doctor's note or doctor information, and having that to be able to be received and reviewed correctly. Any safety testing and clinical data is also crucial to have in this record. And I say that because all brands, we do our safety dossiers, we do our safety profiles. Where do those live, right? They should live in the same area where you are evaluating adverse events so that they are quickly accessible. Did we do safety on sensitive skin? Did we do safety on ages 8 to 17, right? These are the questions you need to have asked and results available immediately. Images of the adverse event, and then manufacturing documents or reports of those batches. Record access, again, FDA has authority to access all records relating to the cosmetic product, and they can request if those that information if they believe the product is adulterated or exposure presents a threat of a serious adverse event, health consequence. And again, records of the responsible person's assessment of the report is really key here. Everyone that I work with, I always say, write down everything, write down your assessment, write down your statement, and write down why you believe this assessment and statement to be true. In 3 years, if FDA comes and asks for something, you want to remember why you assessed that situation and that adverse event that way. And then again, reporting, and I cannot say this enough, 15 business days is a very short period of time. It happens quickly, and it is a lot of information to collect. So please be aware that, that moves fast, and you do not want to miss deadlines that FDA puts into place, especially with the new process that they have of emailing in the MedWatch form. It could get to be a lot. So impact, what are we seeing so far? The contact information, retailers have already reached out to brands, to provide them the contact information because they do not want to be responsible for adverse events that happen with your cosmetic product. And I say that because, they have already done their due diligence and marking your product safe. So if something's happening, they want to be able to contact you immediately and give that information. Some retailers have already requested labels to review to make sure that contact information is properly displayed as well. Is there a process in place? Some retailers have requested point of contact of adverse events to receive from their customers, right? They don't want an influx of calls at Ulta. They don't want an influx of calls of Sephora. They want to be able to know that you have someone that they can directly give this information to. And they also have a follow-up process that they have established, and I have seen this, and it is to make sure that the retailer is not continuing to sell a product that potentially could have adverse event with a lot of their customers. Again, I don't think, there is so many adverse events going on out there that, you have to worry to be having your product recall, but the retailers want to know if there is a problem that you have that proper process in place. Speaking of recall, they do request a recall process, right? So what happens when cosmetic products do need to have a recall? Do you know what to do? Do you know where your batches are? Do you know your distribution, chain? And there are brands that are having to sign affidavits that they're able to properly recall a product. Again, retailers do not want their name in the news for selling a product that potentially could cause adverse events. Customer experience, and I think this is really important for everyone on this phone call and to understand, right? Our customers, our loyal customers are the most important, right? In all of this, we want to protect them. We want to have safe products for them to use. And the customer, in many cases, has educated themselves to know how to read ingredient lists, know what products are, know what ingredients do. It's really wild when you go on TikTok and Instagram. There's like this whole world of, I want to say, social chemists that are able to kind of break down all of this, right? So as brands, as manufacturers, we have to be 1, 5, 10 steps ahead, right? We need to be smarter because we need to make sure that we are protecting and educating in the right way. And you only can do that if you have full transparency to the customer so that they have an enjoyable experience. And if there is a case, there's a health related problem, that we're able to quickly answer their needs. So the contact information, right? Customers can now contact the brand. It's available on the label. There's no more question of who to call. You're not calling Ulta, you're calling the brand. Customers are also provided that contact information from those retailers. So if they get that call with a complaint, they are going to send right to your brand. Customers also understand that the brands are responsible for adverse events. There was so much media coverage last year about adverse events, about this MoCRA. Everyone knows where to go. Customer service versus safety and quality. And I say this because we all love our customer service group. They do probably the hardest work out of everyone. They have to deal with, the face-to-face issues every day, but they are not safety and quality, right? And they are not the same. And evaluating this and recognizing when there is an issue, and a severe issue, needs to be evaluated by a safety and quality team, and action needs to be taken quickly to make sure that you're getting all the available information. And then again, action. How is the safety and quality teams quickly understanding the extent of the adverse event and what next steps need to be taken? Is it a single user issue? Is it a recall? Customers not receiving proper actions and steps could potentially go directly to FDA. This was huge. This is something Dr. Katz spoke about, the 50,000 reports that they received directly from consumers on cosmetic products, because there was nowhere to go to report these. So very, very important to understand that FDA has the ability to accept from the consumer an adverse event on your brand. So you don't want that to happen. You want to be easily accessible to the consumer. You want to show them that you want to hear about their health related events when they do occur. And that is really, really important. And I always say this, because you never want to have the name in industry as being the person that didn't answer, or that your product had a huge issue and the brand did nothing to resolve it. And I always feel that the more transparent you are, the better ability you have to react and to become, the brand that everyone looks to and wants to support. So that being said, myself being from the safety, quality, and regulatory world, I have had my difficulties in managing safety and quality and adverse events. So we worked on this.
We're just experiencing some technical difficulties. We'll be right back on.
So sorry, everyone. A little technical difficulty just occurred. But we are back up and running. Leave it to technology, as I'm about to take you through some really smart technology that we have going for us right now. So I'm going to share with you something that we created and we worked on very hard as a team to create a solution for industry and for everyone to have a way to manage their adverse events in an effective way. So those of you that are already customers of Registrar Corp, you might already know that I'm very familiar with my FDA. If not, here is what it would look like if you handle your registration or your online training or your product listings with us. But most importantly, your adverse event management. And this is really going to come into play if you do not have a process in place and that you need help in developing a process. And as we sign in again, uh, there is, the best way to manage it through that electronic contact, as we spoke about before. And we help you do that, right? So we help you establish an electronic contact that brings you directly to a URL that is designated for your brand. That URL will bring the consumer, as you see right here, to a page that allows them to fill out a consumer form with all the right questions, right? So we have over 50 fields of questions to ask about a adverse event. So this will be displayed on your primary and secondary label. The consumer can go there. They can answer all of their questions. They can answer all of their questions there, where they bought the product, what happened, upload images, everything you can think of. Will be on this consumer page. And then everyone who is involved in the safety and quality or review team of that adverse event will receive a notification that an adverse event had been reported by a consumer instantly. So there's no more waiting for something to come in the mail. There's no more messages and phone numbers. As soon as someone enters in through your URL that is for your brand, they will receive that notification that an adverse event had been reported. What I love about this system too is that it also holds all your cosmetic listings. So if you do your cosmetic listings with Registrar Corp, we upload all your cosmetic listings and you're able to monitor not only your product listing numbers, but you're also able to monitor all your products, right? The categories, the subcategories, and all the adverse events that occur with it. And this helps really with the post-market surveillance of your products because we launch, right? We launch into market and then we kind of go on to the next thing, right? Our safety and quality teams are left with having to kind of deal with potential issues that can come up when in market and people are using it. Because again, our safety studies are done on 50, 100, 200 subjects, and when they hit the masses, we could see a completely different response to those consumers. So very important to understand. You have a post-market surveillance tool here for your products and for your quality teams. And then helps establish that safety dossier that FDA has put into effect as well, right? This helps alleviate a lot of the additional work that might have to be done with the safety reviews that are happening right now on a lot of products. How it works again, when you get that notification, whoever is on the team to receive the notification will get it through their email. It will also appear on my task board. So you will see all new adverse events on this my task board, and it's kind of a way to monitor what type of adverse events are coming in, the consumer's name, the brand. So if you have multiple brands, what brand it's coming in, as well as the product name. So very important to note that the product name you're able to see, right? So if you have, as you can see here, 3 adverse events that came in for the um, fruity body wash, right? You could kind of say, wait a minute, we just had 3 come in. We just launched. Is there an issue, right? And you can quickly assess that. This is the best experience I have seen in industry. We kind of launch and we kind of hope for the best, fingers crossed. But this will allow you to have that full transparency if there is an issue. Again, you'll see the date of the report and then the event type. So in the form the consumer fills out, you're able to see if it's a serious adverse event by what they select, right? Did they select significant burn, significant hair loss, persistent rash, right? that is flagged immediately. And your team is going to be able to say, someone flagged a serious adverse event. We need to take the next steps in order to make sure we get all the information needed to report to FDA. And again, it doesn't mean you need to have every piece of information to report to FDA, but the crucial information in order to report in that 15 business day period, and then continue to report all that information as well. So again, the priority and the event type is crucial. And this is not something that you can do without a software like this, right? So your team of safety and quality might get these reports in, and it might not be immediately reviewed, right? It might not be immediately flagged, where our software can do that for you instantly. Again, as these come in, you're able to view the report. So you're able to review what happened. Is it a case they used the product incorrectly, which could have led to the problem? Did it warn you, do not use if you're sensitive to certain, fruit extracts, things of that nature you want to see here. If it is determined that the report coming in needs to have further investigation, that it isn't that they use the proper, use the product improperly, you can start an investigation here. And I think what I love most about this is that it tracks every piece of your investigation. It tracks your communication with the consumer. It tracks when you request additional documentation. It tracks when you receive the report to when you had a response from the consumer. These are all things FDA wants to see when they come to do an investigation. Did your brand, or as a manufacturer, did you do your due diligence? Did you do as much as physically possible in order to properly assess what happened with this health-related event? Again, we have this great doc status where you can actually upload documentations into the individual accounts. So again, if you have certain safety criteria or safety information, you can upload it here. Certain images of the label, right? Because that is a requirement to submit the label to FDA for a serious adverse event. And you can have on your label, do not expose yourself to sunlight. Do not use if you're sensitive to acids, right? Do not leave on for more than 20 minutes. All of these things come into play and become very important when you have your overall statement and assessment for what happened in the adverse event. Even more important, you can request documents directly from the consumer that had the health related event. And they are able to send back the doctor's note that you need or the pictures that you need, and that all can be stored here. Every time you do anything for this report, there is a huge report history, right? And the report history goes into play of how many times you followed up, how many times did you request certain information. And again, it tracks the priority of the event type. And then if you are overdue in any of those situations. And we have this priority tracker for a reason, because we want to keep you on that 15-day business deadline. So you can see 0 to 2 days is new, 3 to 5 days is to do. When it becomes urgent, when it's 11 to 15 days and then overdue. This helps keep your team on track. This helps them realize if they have not received this information, they should have a report ready to go, ready to submit to FDA if they had not heard back any additional information from the consumer that had the health related event as well. What I love most and what I talked about through this entire, presentation was that currently FDA is accepting, med watch forms and adverse events for cosmetics through an email. So filling out that form could be very, very difficult. So what we have established here is the ability to take your report and download it into the med watch form. So we autofill your report into the med watch form for the necessary information specific to cosmetics. And we neatly compile all of the documents, images, label, even the med watch form into a zip file. That zip file is what can be used to be sent to FDA in order to report your adverse event. I mean, it does not get simpler than that. There's no more looking around for documents or getting your safety information, getting your label. You can compile everything here. And again, this is the short and sweet version of this software. And what we love about it is that it is simple and it's easy to do. But if you would love a full demo of the URL links, consumer reports, and everything else that this does, we're going to give you some contact information at the end to get a full live demo of the ability to manage all of your adverse events through our software. Last but not least, and you heard me say it, when FDA comes and asking for information that you had on a product 4, 5, 6 years ago, we have an archive reports folder, and we hold all of your information, which is protected by the ISO 27001 standard that we have for 6 years. So regardless if you're a small business or not, we archive for 6 years, and you have all of that information readily available. You can even download again into a zip folder and give directly to FDA. One of my key features of going through FDA audits or going through FDA investigations is having everything on a jump drive. I think they call them, USB drives now, dating myself, but having that readily available, right, to hand over. And here's our documents, here's our information, here is how organized we are as a manufacturer to be able to give you this information that you requested. And I think that comes into play when you discuss this type of process and information through your teams, right? Are we ready for this? We just saw this software and maybe we're not ready for this. And again, the investigation part can happen outside of a software, but who really wants to keep track of emails, keep track of who contacted who, and then again, who wants to follow up with all the additional support that could be needed from additional teams and additional manufacturers. The investigation part, I think, is the longest part and the most complicated part. And when you get into situations where you have to attach documents or you have to have zip folders, it can become burdensome, right, on these multiple teams. So having everything in one place is truthfully the best place to do it. One more thing, and then we'll go into some questions. With the review that FDA is, going to have on adverse events and the spotlight that is going to be brought on by retailers, this is also a huge piece that you can show your retailers as well. We have a process in place. Your follow-up to our adverse event, we can send you our report, our investigation, our assessment, and it shows to retailers that you are committed to providing a service to their customers, right? That you can properly not only follow FDA regulations, but be a partner with your retailer to offer the right types of processes and right types of solutions when needed. And I think that is just the key part to understand here. It is bigger than FDA. It's bigger than our manufacturers. It's making sure that you establish yourself as a brand that has the pieces and the concerns into place to properly give to their consumers. So we're going to answer some questions. What I will do for you as well is I'm going to pop up this next screen of contact information. When I say they are the best in business, they are the best in business. So definitely reach out to our cosmetic experts because they know how to answer your hardest questions. Also, if you don't know where to start with MoCRA outside of just adverse events, please use our MoCRA Wizard tool. A lot of love went into this tool trying to make sure that we help people understand what their requirements are under MoCRA. So if you don't know where to start there. But our great team right here, our regulatory advisors, are absolutely wonderful. I could not work with better people in industry understanding MoCRA. So please reach out. And additionally, for attending our webinar, you will receive a 15% discount on our AEM software. So make sure to mention that as well. So let's get to some questions. And I think we can answer a lot of these in the next few minutes. Is the Form 3500A the same form used for OTC products? So yes, it is the same form. In order to get adverse event reporting up and running at the end of 2022, because that did go into effect. So we've been 2 years into having to record, to record and to report adverse events. The only part of that has just went into effect is the receiving, right? The contact information on labels. So if you are receiving adverse events through social media, through emails, or other types of resources, you should have already been record keeping and reporting serious adverse events to FDA. So very important that that 3500A form was to be used. FDA kind of gave directions on how to use that on their website if it was a cosmetic product. But again, NDC numbers, dosage amounts, things like that aren't really understood through people who do not deal with OTC products, specifically OTC cosmetics. So it could be very complicated, but that is the same form. Long story medium. Let's see. How do we deal with adverse events in a situation where the consumer has not provided all the information or has not responded? I love this question, and I'm going to tell you why, because that is the number one, situation that I hear from brands. And, having documented that you received an adverse event from a consumer, that you have tried multiple times to contact that consumer, that you have tried multiple times to follow up with that consumer is what is crucial. And I say this because when consumers contact a brand and they give, your product did this to me and I'm mad, right? And then they just never respond. We don't know if they go directly to FDA. We don't know where they go after that. So having a follow-up process to show that you have communicated that you are willing to receive more information from the consumer is key. So how you saw in our AEM system, how it said report history, contact history, that is going to be your report, right? That is going to be your investigation and your assessment and technically your statement to FDA. For the MedWatch form, and FDA points out you need 4 pieces of information to report a serious adverse event. You need the customer that had the experience, you need the product, you need the responsible person, and you need the adverse event that happened. If you have all of those things, that is what can take you to your initial report to FDA. And I always say, if you only have those 4 things, make sure to additionally have a statement as well. Let's take one more question. Let's see. Do you have to have a URL that is specific for reporting? So yes, you do need to have a URL that is specific to reporting. You cannot have a saleable site to report. A consumer can't just go to skinbeauty.com and have all these different pop-ups come up. And I say that because the consumer is already in a panic trying to understand who to go to for more information. So having a website that just has pop-ups or has sale items or discounts is not the proper way to handle adverse events. And then specifically for the receiving part, the consumer needs to have certain questions that they should be answering when they're giving you that report, which is why it's so important to have a designated site in order to ask the upfront questions, right? And this saves you a ton of time on the back end as well. If you have a site that asks all the questions, has all the necessary information to collect on the initial, report from a consumer, that helps alleviate a lot of your back teams, extra responsibility to having to go out and ask this additional information. One of the biggest complaints I've seen is that brands have put an email address to contact for adverse events. And they are getting hundreds of random emails that have nothing to do with adverse events, that have to do, I don't like the way you change your smell of your product. I don't like the way that the new bottle looks, right? So there's the free form of having an email address or just a comment box is not going to help your team be able to do the job that they need to do. And I say that because you want to be able to get the information you need, just like the question before, right? Like, what do we do when the customer stops responding and we don't have a response, right? So that first initial interaction with a consumer, you should gain as much information as possible, because it's important for your team to know the necessary information if they need to record all that information or eventually report to FDA. Let's see. If we have such a sentence on the outer counter container, inner container not labeled for individual resale, please use outer container for complete information. Can we not put the contact information on the primary product label? That is a great question. And again, we're in a space where we're waiting for more information from FDA about, not for individual retail sale. My stance on this is, if it is in a consumer's hand, even if it's not for retail sale, if it's promos or anything, it's still smart to have your contact information on both primary and secondary labeling, because even if it's for promo, not individual sale, you still are going to run into the situation of a consumer using your product and potentially having an adverse event, and not being able to access you as a brand to respond to their adverse event. We'll take one more question. And this is a really good one. Does FDA plan on giving more information on how to handle reporting to FDA? So, as I mentioned before, FDA is doing such a phenomenal job with MoCRA. I'm so impressed with Dr. Katz, Dr. Bumpus, and everything that they have done. I think it is a lot to have taken on in the short period that they have taken on. I think we are seeing a lot of the changes happen. Maybe not as fast as we'd like to see them happen, but we are seeing a lot of, guidance come out. We're seeing updates of guidance come out. We're having, delays if they feel that industry cannot meet some of these, deadlines. So we're very much in tune that FDA is doing their best to make sure industry is educated. I see Dr. Katz and Dr. Bumpus everywhere in industry trying to give as much information as possible. But I really think it's the structure that they're going to have to be able to set up, right? So what happens when an adverse event occurs? Do you go directly to the responsible person? But what if there is a manufacturer involved? What if the problem is coming from where it's manufactured? So we are going to see, I think, a lot of this discussion, and a lot of what is going to happen when more of the GMP guidelines and regulations start to bubble up to the surface. I think that is where we're going to see a huge regard to how to handle when it is a isolated health related event versus when it is a public health concern because of the product. And I say that because, is there contamination? Is there micro issues? So I think these are going to go so much hand in hand. And I think that is a lot of what FDA is trying to figure out right now, is how to properly assess all these adverse events, properly get them all in, evaluate what's going on, right? So that they can determine the safety precautions during manufacturing, the safety precautions for safety substantiation. All these things are intertwined together, right? There's not one standalone adverse events happen, right? Adverse events, happen because of certain information that's gathered during, right, that we discovered during investigation. So I think we're very much still in that investigative space, that educational space, and learning about how all of this is going to work together to protect the consumer, right? Protect the public health. And that is exactly what FDA's role is. That is exactly what we believe in here at Registrar Corp, right? We want to protect our consumers. We want to keep everyone happy and healthy, and make sure that it is not a huge burden on brands to get something like this implemented into their systems, and to become compliant and stay compliant as we keep navigating through all the rest of the regulations that we're going to see, and how we can help support you. So again, thank you everyone for joining. I'm so happy to have shared this webinar series with you and shared the AEM software. Again, please contact our great cosmetic regulatory advisors. They'll take you through a full demo. They'll show you the URL. It is a really, really amazing system. I cannot, tell you the love and care that have went into building this, and the overall process from a safety and quality perspective. So all of it is all combined together. Thank you so much, and we cannot wait to see you at the next webinar.